Single by Cabaret Voltaire on the Rough Trade record label, Eddie's Out.
I sometimes despair at the state of music, popular music. The tribalism that's sort of come into music now is ridiculous, and the backpedaling that's going off is ridiculous. You know, the trends that arrive and disappear. I mean, the majority of music now that is in the charts hasn't really stepped out of the 50s, let alone out of the 60s and 70s. You know, it's 1981, and people are still sort of flogging Chuck Berry riffs to death. I think it's quite strange, you know, because the groups that are being set up and knocked down, the trends that are being set up and knocked down, the tribalism, etc., that's sort of gone on. It's just sort of spiralling, and the trends are getting faster and faster in their turnover, and it's sort of going to an ultimate implosion, you know, of styles and music, and the whole popular thing's just going to sort of disappear of its own accord, I think. I mean, it's the way that people are making music, as well as the way the media reports on music and the vested interest that all the big companies have at the moment. It's sort of a bad thing to do, to sort of try and develop new ways of doing things, or at least experiment with new notions or whatever of making music and the way it's structured. It's quite sad that it's frowned upon. It's frowned upon to sort of think now, almost. Anybody who injects in their music some form of not an intellectual element, but away from the moronic thing. Anybody who steps away from that moronic thing, anybody who sort of slightly rocks the boat, is frowned upon and jumped upon by the media and sort of generally pushed out of the whole arena of things, which I find quite sad.
Yeah.
And it's going on and on and on, and no one's really breaking any new ground at the moment.
When you look at the Roman civilization, and I mean, it seems like an odd step, but their progress was limited by the sort of their numeral system, you know, the sort of Roman numerals, and because that made only sort of simple mathematics possible, and so they were stuck to a certain stage of progress because they couldn't sort of do anything that involved advanced mathematics, and so they were sort of limited by their tools. And there's the example that when the only tool you've got is a hammer, then you tend to see every job as a nail. And it wasn't until the sort of numeral system that we use today, which makes advanced mathematics possible, was introduced, that progress could continue. And it seems like this situation has come about to a great extent because we're sort of trying to do today's jobs with yesterday's tools. I mean, this is a sort of general thing, not just music, but the whole, it seems like we're sort of generally going through some sort of period of change, and continuing to try and do the jobs that aren't there anymore. You know, that the jobs have changed, and it's not that yesterday's tools are wrong, it's just that the job has changed and the tools are inappropriate, and they just don't do today's jobs anymore. And obviously the idea is to sort of try and find new and appropriate tools to do today's jobs.
Well, the whole way that Western society is structured at the moment is sort of gradually going to pot, and they can't find any sort of way out of it. I.e., we've sort of developed very, very rapidly, but the majority of thinking from all political angles is still very 19th century, still very much sort of geared to the Industrial Revolution. We're still educated, we're still socialised into the notion of unless you're employed, unless you're working, then you're of no use to society. And kids have still been educated like that, and they won't accept the fact that we no longer need to work. Not everybody needs to work, you know. No one needs to work 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, and that no one needs to be in a sort of a stationary position. No one needs to sort of live in the same place, and the idea of mobility. We're still sort of educated in the way that we were in the 19th century, and we're going to end up in about 10 years' time with an extremely paranoid generation of people who don't know where they fit into things, which I find very frightening, actually.
The sort of fashions and the tribe things that are sort of set up, and the sort of the speed that they're going, that seems to be one reaction to it, that it's a sort of quantitative, to put it one way, would be a quantitative change in habitual patterns, a sort of just do what you've been doing but more so, and what really we need is a sort of innovation, which is a sort of qualitative change, rather than the sort of just doing more and more. We actually need to stop and change what we're doing.
Yeah, at the moment we're just blindly going on, pretending everything's okay, and I think music is quite a good litmus test for things like that, you know? At the moment music is geared to safety, it's geared to sheer entertainment. There's this sort of general sort of psychosis or whatever at the moment all over, that whatever you do, maintain the status quo, because otherwise things will get worse and no one will actually stop and sort of reassess the situation. It's quite frightening that people are being blinkered into things and no one's sort of prepared to stand up and say that the changes that are going on need to be taken into account, and we should sort of readjust the way we think and the way we act and the way that people fit into society or whatever. No one's prepared to say that at the moment, which is quite strange.
Well, I mean, do you see anyone outside of the music world that's doing the equivalent of what you're doing, but just using a different medium?
I think there's a hell of a lot of people. Off the top of my head, I mean, William Burroughs, for one thing, is doing very much the same thing with words. He will give the words or the phrases or whatever a life of their own, and I think that's what we try to do with sound. I take different sounds and place them together, and the juxtaposition of those sounds gives them a new sort of lease on life, a new meaning. And so people like Burroughs do that with words, and you can also say the same sort of thing in the art world, from abstract expressionism to people who use collages to sort of, I don't know, people like Hartfield or the photo montage and things like that. So there's a lot of parallels. We're not, we don't feel as though we're sort of what we're doing is unique. It's just an expression, and is just the way we structure it or whatever in the format that we use. It just varies. But I think there's a hell of a lot of people doing the same sort of thing. I think we've sort of been sort of making music or coming up at an interesting time where during sort of from maybe 75 or whatever onwards, the techniques that were pioneered or whatever with the development of synthesizers, the simple use of multi-track tape or whatever, meant that people could sort of express whatever they wanted to without having a tremendous backlog of knowledge, about those sort of instruments, and also the sort of the feeling that came up around 77 and the punk period. There was a sort of rejection of the notion that you had to be a trained musician, you had to pay your dues or whatever to make music, and I think we've come along through that as well. And I think a lot of what happened over, say, 75 to 79, we were part of that. Maybe our music was different, but I think the feeling was that you didn't have to have that prior knowledge and that expertise. The technology has meant that people can a lot easier than they could before make music and make it readily available through cassette format, through record format, the independent thing, and in studios a lot of the mystique has been broken down as well. I think we've sort of come up in quite an interesting period.
the sort of things that you're finding out and the sort of areas that you're getting into, that it's gradually filtering through to the sort of, should we say, the sort of chart music?
Yeah, I mean, I think we ourselves are moving not towards the charts specifically, but I think we've sophisticated what we're doing, and I think there's like a cross point where the public is aware of sort of the means that we use, and we're aware of what formula is most attractive to other people, so therefore get our sort of our messages or whatever, what would the music over to more people. But I think there's also people within music who are also doing the same sort of thing, and I can see that we've not had a direct influence, but I think people like us have indirectly influenced some of the sort of chart music or whatever that's around now.